What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we are here with Danny of Crazy Lixx. Thanks for being here today, man. It's great to have you here.
Cool, no problem.
Yeah. So we have the new album Street Lethal coming out November 5th. You just want to talk about like how the making of this album was in terms of the songwriting and the recording. How did Street Lethal sort of see the light of day?
Well, when we started working on the album, or when Frontiers, our label, reached out and said it was time for a new album, we didn't really feel like doing another one because we felt like we weren't totally done with the last one for a while. We had most of the tour still ahead of us, and at that point, we just had postponed the shows. But quite fast we realized that we had to cancel and the pandemic was going to go on for longer. So we know that we just had to kind of forget about the last album and start working on this one. So it was a bit of a heavy start, but once we got the inspiration flowing, things went on pretty good. Um, so yeah, I'm very happy with the results, and I think that it came out really good. Yeah.
Do you think that sonically that it is kind of like picking up where you left off after Forever Wild, since like this wasn't the original intention, or with how different the world is, maybe the music became a little different in turn as well?
Well, I mean, when it comes to the songwriting and the style of the songs, I think they're quite similar. We've used some external songwriters now, this time, which is a bit different from the last album, but I'm not sure people would actually be able to pick out which songs were written by external songwriters because we've made sure that all the songs were still within the kind of overlapping Crazy Lixx sound. But sonically, I mean, there is a big difference, and that's in the mixing, I think, because we've used another mixing engineer this time as opposed to the last two albums. And it's a bit more modern, a bit more punchy, and maybe more up to date with how people expect it to sound nowadays. So going from a bit more retro in the sound to still being retro when it comes to the songwriting and the production, but having the sound a bit updated on the mixing side, I would say.
hmm Was there like maybe a preconceived idea of how you wanted Street Lethal to sound like? Like, was this something that you've always wanted to make, or given this wasn't originally intended, or something like that? That maybe there was a lot of improvising involved. You mentioned like when the inspiration struck, everything kind of flowed through. But
Yeah.
did it feel like maybe there was a different sort of formula, bringing in external songwriters and stuff?
Well, we always like to start an album by having some kind of like I wouldn't say a theme because they're not like concept albums by any means, but something to just get us inspired. And we started doing this when we had on the Rough Justice album. We had this video game company coming up to us and asking us to write songs for their Friday the 13th game.
Oh,
And those three songs set the whole mood for the album. So it was kind of dark and gloomy and kind of a nighttime feel. So we wanted to replicate that on the last album. So we imagined that we were doing like a soundtrack to a like 80s fighter pilot movie. And this time we wanted to do something similar. So we set out to do instead now kind of a soundtrack to an early 90s martial arts movie like Karate Kid or Best of the Best or something like that. So that was something that we were had in the back of our head all the time when we were writing.
mhm.
I think you could hear that in a lot of the songs, both lyrically and musically.
Are
We had
mov
that.
Are movie soundtracks often like a source of inspiration? Because I've always said that movie soundtracks, regardless if they're action movies or horror movies or romance movies or drama movies, like they always have very intriguing soundtracks, and I think that they elevate the plot. Do you guys take inspiration from movie soundtracks often?
Yeah, I would say very much. When I grew up, it was very common that the movies that I watched always had like a very awesome kind of electronic synth theme, and then the obligatory hard rock song as well. So uh, that's always something that I'm going back to. The action movies from my youth always had this kind of rock music to it. So I think that they go together very well, and so it's a good source of inspiration.
Yeah, yeah. Because when I heard the term street lethal, and forgive me for making such a pretty off assumption, but I thought street lethal was almost kind of like a rock or heavy metal version of West Side Story.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, the title for the album was actually quite late because we had a song on the album, obviously, that was called Street Lethal. The same thing actually for the last album. We had a song called Forever Wild, and those named the album in the end. But it's not really like a the title track or anything. I don't feel like it's the strongest song. It's just it was a title that we thought was would look very cool on the album cover, and it draws the kind of parallels to like 90s video games, like beat 'em up video games like Street Fighter or you know
Double Dragon.
Fatal Fury. Yeah, sure, Double Dragon. Um, and also it sounds like a movie from that day, so we thought it sounded cool,
Yeah.
something like that.
I've always thought that like your album titles too could would also make good movies as well. Like the term like New Religion or Riot Avenue or Rough
Yeah,
Justice. Like it almost sounds like I could picture these on like a movie flyer as much as I'd picture it on like a tour flyer or a CD.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. We always have the same formula. It's always two words. It's always a couple of syllables. We started it with Loud Minority, and then it just went on from there. So that's a formula that we haven't moved away from still, and I imagine that we'll be keeping it in the future as well. I think it looks very good. It's easy to say the title, and it makes for good album covers usually.
Do you think that maybe your songwriting process, like, because I mean, the opening track to Street Lethal is Enter the Dojo, and like, and I think like, that is a perfect opening title track. Do you almost like look at each song maybe as like its own scene in a movie in a way? Or is that maybe overthinking this whole conversation?
No, I mean there is a point to it definitely. At least the songs that are moving, within that theme, because there are songs in the album that move away from the martial arts theme, but definitely Enter the Jojo along with Rise Above, of course, and The Power is another one. Reach Out is another one. Then you have the Final Fury and the Street Lethal combination, which is also like another scene. So for those, I definitely envision like Reach Out would be like the underdog training in some rough outside weather. Rise Above is the competition itself, so there's I've had stuff like that in my mind when I wrote the songs, envisioning this movie.
Now, obviously, thinking of these themes in these movies obviously influence the lyricism, but do you almost feel that they could also cast an inspiration on the music itself as well?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like, do you think that that you think of this theme before there's music involved, and maybe that could help influence the sound of the music?
Oh yeah, yeah, very much. I mean, we set out to pick like a theme quite early on. So I never would have written like the intro that you mentioned. Under the Dojo has a very clear like Asian influence to it, which fits the martial arts theme, and wouldn't be something that I would throw in on an album unless we chose that theme ahead. Now I had the little melody thingy in my head since a while back, but it fit very well here, and I also put it in the solo for Rise Above, so there's like a connection between those two. But definitely we wouldn't have that kind of intro if we didn't think of the theme ahead.
Hmm. I'm curious because next year is going to be the anniversary of what album is it again? Next year is going to be the anniversary of Riot Avenue, and I was curious to maybe what the sort of theme was that for Riot Avenue in a way, like what kind of films you were all watching.
Well, there's a kind of post-apocalyptic thinking on that album. I think we set out to do something and we didn't reach all the way. I mean, it was an experiment in a way, Riot Avenue, because we moved away from our sound on the previous album quite a lot. Also, the songwriting, and at that time there were two guitarists that are no longer in the band who influenced the sound quite a lot. So I would say that in a way, Riot Avenue is the album that's I think furthest from the others in our discography in a way. So it's definitely we tend to not play as much songs from that album live either. But I do know some people that very much, like the album and think it's the best in our discography. So, but it's definitely a bit different from the others. Yeah.
Well, with the post-apocalyptic theme revolving around this, I almost feel like that album makes a little too much sense nowadays, right?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, we have a little futuristic thinking of this album as well. So it's meant to be set. I wouldn't say cyberpunk all the way because that's obviously a thing that's very popular nowadays. But something set in a near future, maybe not post-apocalyptic, but maybe like right before the apocalypse rather than after.
Hmm.
Uh, so I mean, there's a lot of movies that take place in that kind of near future when I was a kid growing up. Stuff like Terminator, for example, which is just a few years ahead. So it's not futuristic, it's not sci-fi by any means, but it's an uncertain future, not very far away that you can still imagine that stuff would happen. So
Damn. And has there ever been a time like that maybe your personal life or your personal experiences could have also have influenced the lyricism in the music as well, or do you tend to use this music as a way to distance yourself from your personal life?
I would say that very little of the songwriting is actually autobiographical by any mean. There are songs that I have like a deep connection with, but there's also been cases where people have been asking me, "Oh, the lyrics for that one is so sad. I'm so sorry I had to live through that." And I'm like, "I didn't. It's just a story I made up in my mind." And I have quite a quiet family life when I'm in private, so not many of the songs are actually about stuff from my real life, but. Um, I think a good songwriter can imagine being in someone else's shoes and trying to write from that perspective. So that's what I mostly do.
Do you feel like maybe in like each song you're portraying a character of some sort in a way?
Yeah, I mean, especially now I've never been into martial arts. I've never even fought for real in my entire life. I've never been like in a physical fight. So that's very distant from me. But I'm imagining almost like through the eyes of a movie character or a video game character. I mean, I've played a lot of beat 'em up games, so I know how to imagine being in that position. So I'm always thinking like through an alter ego, which is not me, but still it's like controlled by me or acted by me in some way.
Speaking of fighting games, we'll talk about this a little bit because I never get to have this discussion with any of the bands I interview. But were you ever a Soul Calibur fan at all?
I just heard the name. I was a Sega kid when I was growing up. It was not a very popular console here in Sweden, so I was quite alone. Every other kid had Nintendo and PlayStation, but so I played Street Fighter a bit and Double Dragon, as you say, but didn't. I never moved on to like the Tekkens and all those Mortal Kombat and stuff like that. So
Did you play
unfortunately.
Primal Rage?
Uh, but that's Streets of Rage, right? No,
No,
I don't think I recognize Prime Rage.
no. Primal Rage is kind of like is very much like Street Fighter or and whatnot, but it's like with monsters and dinosaurs.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay. No, that doesn't ring a bell.
oh, oh wow. Well, if you do you still have the Sega?
I don't have it, unfortunately. I gave it away to some cousins, and when they got older, they gave it back to me, but it was not no longer functioning. So
Uh,
I've uh, I've downloaded some emulators later on and tried to play with my kids, but they're not very interested. They enjoy their modern games instead. So
You got to we need to show as somebody who grew up with like Nintendo 64 and downwards and like even the GameCube now is looked at as ancient. Like we need to start teaching the as much as we need to start teaching the youth about rock and roll, we also need to teach them about video games where like if you wanted a secret character, you couldn't just enter a cheat code. You had to beat that
yeah,
character.
yeah. There was no pay to play. There was no patching. You just bought the game and that was it, and you had to kind of figure it out for yourself. I know there were even some games that were so nasty. There were secrets within them that you could almost only find out if you like had a subscription for Nintendo Power or I don't remember what the Sega magazine was called, but really really tough stuff that you couldn't find out yourself, and you had to ask around with among friends. Yeah, no, it was definitely difficult times. Today, you can usually buy yourself out of problems in the game.
Yeah, I know. It actually like see, I've been, being a millennial, I've never really had a problem, like I got most of my music off iTunes growing up. I've,
Yeah,
grew up with the internet and YouTube and stuff, but these kids today don't know the struggle of having to really beat a fighting game.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I agree. And I mean, my kids mostly play like these building games. They're very much into Minecraft and stuff like that. I mean, I understand it. It's like Legos, but in a computer game. So I'm okay with that. But they're never really challenged in any game. It's just like sandbox stuff basically. So
Yeah.
not really what I was used to when I was a kid.
Yeah, when the kids, when my nieces and nephew are older, I'm gonna give them a copy of Dead or Alive, and then they could play that and see how easy it is. No, but do you almost feel like maybe when you're making music, it almost is kind of like a similar fulfillment as when you're like playing video games in a way? Like, when you finish a song, it almost feels like you beat that character or something like that?
I mean, in a way, there. It's a very long process because you have like these moments of fulfillment. But I mean, when you write a song for the first time, even when you just have the shell, maybe you don't have the lyric completed or anything, you have a sense of fulfillment. You just passed like around, but you know that there's actually a lot of stuff before that song ends up on an album, before that album is promoted properly, before that album is recorded and released. So from the songwriting, it can be like almost a year until people actually get to hear the song. So there's a lot of stuff in between, and there is a sense of victory at every step. So first you have the songwriting, then you have the actual recording, and then you get it all together and you get it to the label and they like it, and then you start promoting and do videos.
Yeah.
So I mean that's one of the very nice parts about working in music, that the work is quite different. One day you're a songwriter, the next day you have to be a sound engineer, and then you're a video producer, and then you go out and perform live on stage, hopefully. So there's yeah, a lot to do.
Have you ever thought about making a Crazy Lixx video game one day?
Yeah, it would be cool. I was actually, when I was younger, I was into pursuing a career in computer games. I can program still to this day. I'm quite proficient with programming, but I never pursued that avenue fully on. But yeah, who knows? Maybe in the future, someone will contact us and maybe do something. And
You
we'd
sh-
love to write some more music for more video games, anyways.
there needs to be a fighting game where you use certain metal musicians as the character. Like, just imagine like Rob Halford versus Phil Anselmo, or
Yeah,
or who knows, maybe we could get that James Hetfield, Dave Mustaine, something like that.
and the last boss is probably Gene Simmons squirting fire and having a whip tongue or something.
No, no, no. The final boss is anybody who is any enemy of metal. Like, I think the final boss
Oh yeah,
Would be Cardi B.
right, right.
But so before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I always love nerding out on video games and music.
No problem.
Is there just anything else that you would like to promote? Is there a chance that maybe you could bring Crazy Licks to the States one day? We'd love to have you here.
I mean, the thing that we have booked now is the Monsters of Rock cruise, which is like for the American audience, but obviously not very, affordable for most people maybe. But I'm not sure what will happen with that. But that's the thing that we have nearest in the future. We are looking into the US. We actually had plans that were quite far along before the pandemic hit, for the last album. So we'll be picking up from those, and hopefully in the fall, probably we'll be able to come over. But the situation is quite uncertain still. We've had to cancel and move around a lot of stuff. And we still have some shows that we don't know if we'll be able to do, even in Europe. And we have Russia booked, where the situation is chaotic right now. So um, nothing is certain, but we have a big audience in the US, and we'd love to come over. So we're doing everything we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Crazy Licks. Be sure to check out Street Lethal coming out November 5th. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.